As mentioned off the top of the show, our next guest joining us live in studio, Brian Thomas, a community outreach therapist, specializes in addiction. You've spent years working on the front lines. Let me ask you this, and I think this might surprise folks. As we get closer to legalization, are you worried there'll be more problems? Are you worried there'll be more folks you have to deal with? You'll have more clients? Or is it, I don't want to say much ado about nothing, I don't want to downplay it, but what's your concerns, if any, as we get closer?
Well, I'm actually more interested in controlling and getting rid of the prohibition on cannabis because it can actually be harder for youth clients that I've worked with to access alcohol or cigarettes than it is to go score pot from the guy next door. So when they say things like, you know, they're worried about the kids or easier access for kids, it's kind of, I don't know where they're getting their information from really, but working on the front lines and working with youth, working with homeless, working with educators, law enforcement, everyone that I've talked to and trained, no one's sitting there going, oh my God, cannabis is going to be legal. No one's really freaking out about it from what I've seen.
Well, I was going to say 35 years ago, 40 years ago when I'm in school, it was easy to get, and it hasn't gotten harder in the 40 years since.
No.
So that's why, like, for sometimes, even when I hear the minister talking about packaging and attracting kids, this isn't something brand new. This is something that's existed already. We're just trying to kind of get a handle on things.
Well, it's like anything in government, it takes forever to get sorted out and straightened out and who's going to make the money and how's this going to benefit society. And what I've seen and what I always promote is that we have to drop the stigmatism of what an addict is or the whole stereotype of what someone's doing that's killing themselves with drugs or can't function without narcotic or cannabis or whatever it is. Because when you make something illegal, we all know that makes a lot of black market people rich. And there's no control, everything's adulterated. And that's more at risk for my clients when they're going to score a flap off the street and they're addicted to crystal meth. They don't know exactly what they're getting. We've had clients come into the clinic lately that are buying street level narcotics, and they're thinking that they're going to get an opiate. So they say, oh, I'm just doing heroin, and everyone's testing positive for fentanyl, ecstasy, and benzos. So it's a cocktail. It's a freaking cocktail.
You don't know what you're getting.
Oh, not a chance. Not a chance.
You know, we talked about this before the show. So many times you hear from folks over the years, gateway drug. Well, you're going to smoke a joint, the next thing you know, you have a needle in your arm. It goes hand in hand.
Big time.
And it's been proven time and time again. You see scientific reports go, no, that's not the case. But now I'm hearing, I've spoken to folks that deal with the opioid crisis and fentanyl, and they go, no, you know what? We can use marijuana as an exit drug.
Yeah.
Why
not? I mean, you could use the Easter Bunny for an exit drug.
Right.
As long as someone's going to buy in, like it, and want to get invested. Just like what he was talking about before me with the meditation, and that's a beautiful way to heal someone therapeutically. They got to buy in. So if we can reduce the harm physically to themselves and society, we have to mature as a society. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Talking to the black and white and the old school versus law enforcement, and a lot of police officers are like, weed, whatever, because they just obviously aren't gonna. The only reason they enforce the law is because it's written in law. Other than that, it's Sorry, I'm totally nervous. I thought it was supposed to be like a radio show, dude.
Yeah. No worries, buddy. Pretend there's nobody here.
These lights are annoying. Yeah.
Let me ask you again. In the years, when you're dealing with kids, and not even kids, but folks that are dealing with addiction, is marijuana ever the issue? It's always something else, is it not?
Well, it's like, okay, if you smoke an ounce a day and you can't stop, yes, it becomes a problem because you become, little Billy's not motivated anymore. It's like that commercial, the kid, marijuana's never caused any harm to me, and he's still on the video, playing video games on the couch.
You're looking for a job today, Jimmy? No, Mom.
No.
Yeah.
That was stay home.
Right.
I mean, that was great. But no, with that whole gateway drug, I mean, even in my early education years, I had to do some intervention in the schools, and it was literally in Health Canada's brochure. It's still that same, isn't it Nixon that came up with that shit?
Yeah, it's all misinformation, yeah.
Like, really? And so it's been a very powerful tool, actually, in therapy when you know, I go see little Billy, and he's smoking way too much pot. He quit lacrosse. He's not doing things for himself. He's cutting school. Because, yeah, he's getting totally lethargic, and he's probably smoking so much indica that he's couch locked, right? So, of course, little Billy's not going far. But when I tell little Billy, dude, you're abusing your medications, he looks at me different. He's like, oh, well, cannabis helps me. I'm like, well, how does cannabis help? It's just like someone, how does methadone help? Right? We're reducing the harm by educating these people. So with youth, it's always been a really good catalyst as far as you're over-abusing your medication. You're over-abusing your scripts, right? And like I said to you
everything
before,
in moderation, yeah.
Well, moderation, but I mean, it's the same thing as if you got back pain today and you get Percocet, you're gonna take 8 pills or what's prescribed? Like even in like the 12-step literature, it says, you know, we don't have an opinion on medication, but yet if you take it as prescribed, you don't change your clean date. So it's responsible use. Even AA talks about responsible use. So that's pretty much the gist of it when it comes to medications. And people say in therapy, like, oh, you know, pot helps me. I say, well, show me how pot helps you. Right. If it's you know, just another thing to stick in your body and get wasted on, then and you're not moving forward in your life, there's no spiritual development, your relationships are still shitty, whatever's going on. But what changed my mind about cannabis early on was, well, for one, the gateway drug is really alcohol, by far. I'm gonna, you know, I'll just say it like I see it. Yeah. I mean, you know, alcohol is one of the number causes for all of our hospital visits. Like it's 50% apparently now, alcohol related. The people that I see that abuse alcohol get Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, where they get the wet brain, early dementia. They're the toughest clients to ever work with. One of the successful candidates we had with cannabis substitution was a chronic drinker, edibles. He just, and I think he got so couch locked he couldn't walk to the liquor store. Right? Inadvertently a little bit of greenies, just some greenies, but he was all right once he figured out his titration of dose, and it was actually pretty useful. And there's even people that are still using they call it cannabis substitution. You know, what is that, what they call it? Anyways. But what really changed my mind about it was I worked with this one youth who had the worst ADD you've ever seen. So he'd come for session, he'd be like this, hey, what's up? And he'd have to stand up and walk around. I could get 2 sentences out of him at all. And it was, you know, he had heavy trauma, you know, abuse, all sorts of heinous things that I've witnessed in my line of work. And so it was actually 4:20. I was up in the office. Him and a couple of his other buddies, other clients of mine, come into my office, gaggling along and, you know, happy as clams. And I'm like, and I looked at him, you're baked. But he sat down and he just sat like this. Hey, Brian. And we talked for 45 minutes straight. And now he was given Ritalin, he was given Adderall, and a lot of these like pharmaceutical stimulants. But when he smoked a sativa, he was calm as a cow. He was, and we had the best, we actually had therapeutic growth. So when I talk like that to some of my colleagues, like, you know, it's still polarized in the industry.
I was going to ask you, like, if I had a group of folks in your line of work, you know, all together here, how many would go, oh yeah, no, Brian's speaking the gospel, I agree with what he's saying, and how many would go, no man, you're totally out to lunch, you're missing the boat? Well, that's changed over time. Yeah. Because one, I'm old, and I've been around for a while, and they can't shut me up. The other part is the proof is in the person at the end of the day. So when you look at the case, like I do a case presentation for a client, it's like he did this, and yes, you know what? That's the most commonest I've ever seen this client was after he'd smoked cannabis. And then I started thinking, okay, well, it's not toxic, right? And I think about like, I have to plug the Joe Rogan joke. Yeah. My favorite one is the only way someone would actually die from cannabis is if a ton of it fell out of a plane and crushed them. Right. Because I think it's 14 pounds of consumption in 14 minutes or something? Again, no one's ever died. I think if you ate 14 pounds of carrots in 14 minutes, you'd probably die too. Right. But anyways, yeah, so in harm reduction, the model is basically, and like I said, I am more with working with people, it's more about where they're at in their lives, right? So if you had, like with the harm reduction and the methadone and all that sort of stuff that came out, a lot of people, it's very polarized. So if you lined up 14 of my colleagues, some would be like, oh, cannabis is just a drug, whatever, right? And then some would say, well, don't use cannabis, but here, take Suboxone if you're gonna come off an opiate, right? So it's like 31 flavors. Right. Because I'm talking about, we were talking about earlier about my industry where it's really weird. Like we got L. Ron Hubbard Scientologists have a treatment center and they've got the cure. Then we got this other model and another model and another model and all across the board. And so who's really right? But I would say that they're all right because Again, everyone would need something different. Everyone who's got an issue needs something different to help them get over whatever it is, the hump, to get past it. So the more choices, the better, I would think.
Well, and if something substitutes buying the adulterated crap on the street, or gets a woman who's prostituting herself, like working with a teenage female prostitute is an eye-opener. Oh. And if you say, hey, you want to come to this abstinence-based model right now? A lot of times they're like, no way, they can't vision their lives. They've got trauma, they're addicted to the opiate. Kicking an opiate is the most brutal pain for people, right? So if I said, hey, try this pharmaceutical medication that's properly dispensed and properly monitored, just like cannabis is gonna be, right? With the doses of THC, and they go, okay, I'll try that. So, as a parent, if that was my kid, yes, whatever works, stop soliciting and having to sleep with old men.
Right.
Or whatever, right?
Yeah, whatever.
So, and the thing about addictions and mental health, it doesn't really strike a nerve until it hits home.
Right.
Joe Taxpayer, Joe Public was like, oh, these homeless people, blah, blah, blah. And I get it, but really the homeless population is really small. And the biggest cost is because of the prohibition and law enforcement. These huge costs.
I think of how much has been spent on that. It's mind-boggling.
Well, think of Harper. He wanted to take us right into prisons for profit. Yay! Yeah, well, it didn't work 20 years ago in the States,
bro. No, we wouldn't be where we are now.
But I'd get more clients because they'd mandate clients to me, and that's always good.
Yeah. Carmen, I think, is going to have a couple of questions for us. Thanks. Oh, Camille. See, and I keep fixing it. Oh, see, and I was apologizing for calling you Camille because I thought it was Carmen. You know what? Thank you. Greg in Port Hardy has a question for you.
Port Hardy, what's up?
Exactly. What's up, Port Hardy? Isn't switching addicts from opiates to cannabis just dragging out their recovery?
Well, sure. But if it actually reduces the harm... okay,
maybe
so
if you start the process.
I guess I'd have to ask, are you talking about switching them from street heroin to cannabis? Or are you talking about methadone to cannabis? Or are you talking about...
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's quality of life for the client, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're actually moving forward and they say, yeah, I smoke pot at the end of my day, but they're working, they're happy. And really that's what it's about, right? Our quality of life. We don't have the word substance addiction in the Gov anymore. We use substance use. We're trying to take the stigma of addict and da-da-da-da-da, or mental health.
Right, oh, that's interesting.
But no, it's a good question because, I understand that it's a really big one because there's a lot of people I talk to that, and it's like the rants that I've seen on, and other comments I've seen on public, social media, where it's just replacing one drug for another drug.
Right.
Right? And that's, yes, you are. But there
if one's less harmful than the other, wouldn't that still be a good thing?
Hey, man, I've had clients, but it's the same thing. I've had clients that have, come off of the methadone. Cannabis helps them through that as long as they come off properly.
Right.
But does their quality of life improve? And that's how we base success in therapy.
I would think so.
I don't care if you have to huff Pam every day, dude, but you know what? If your life gets better every day, you go, Billy.
Right.
Right? Yeah, right.
Brian, thanks so much for your time, man.
Oh, you're
I appreciate
welcome.
it tremendously. You have one of those jobs, and I say this about your line of work and nurses. Whenever I walk out of the hospital that I've got, you're in there for something, or a family member, I walk out, I go, I don't know how those people do that every day, because you're dealing with people that are in their worst possible shape, and you would be, to the same degree, a little different, maybe even worse. They're not getting the help. At least in the hospital, you're getting help at that point.
Right.
You're dealing with people at their worst. It's got to be. Before I let you go, what does keep you going back every day?
What keeps me going back every day is my passion to serve my community and society. And it's also, when I meet a client who's in a psych ward at age 16 for crystal methacosis, and now he's a psych nurse and a triathlete, and he's 30.
Right.
Owns his place, has his car, and he smokes pot.
Right.
Let's condemn that guy. But anyways,
Brian
who might have judged quality of life, right?
I hear you. Community outreach therapist, thanks so much for joining us.